They say some moments haunt you forever. No matter how much time passes, no matter how hard you try to forget, they cling to you like a shadow, always lurking, always reminding you of the line you crossed. It's been 2 years since that day. 2 years since everything changed. And yet, even now, I can still hear his voice in my head. The way he said my name, the way his eyes widened, confused, uncertain. The way the air in the room suddenly felt heavy, like we had stepped into a place we weren't supposed to be. I remember the smell of the evening, warm food in the air, the faint trace of his cologne, the distant hum of the television playing a show neither of us were really watching. It was just an ordinary night. Until it wasn't. You see, people always think they know what they would do in a situation like this. They think they understand their own limits, their own boundaries. They think, I would never. But the truth is, you never really know. Not until you stand on the edge looking down, feeling something inside you whisper, just one step, just one. And I took that step. It was innocent at first, or at least I told myself it was. A simple offer, nothing more. But the moment the words left my mouth, I knew. I saw it in his face. That flicker of hesitation, that moment of shock. And deep down, beneath the surface, something else. Something neither of us wanted to admit was there. That was the moment. The one I can't take back. The one that still keeps me up at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying it over and over again. And now I'm going to tell you everything. But before I do, I need you to ask yourself something. Have you ever felt a moment slip out of your control? Have you ever watched yourself do something you knew you shouldn't but couldn't stop? Because if you haven't, then let me be the first to warn you. It only takes 1 second to cross a line that can never be erased. Before I reveal what really happened, make sure to subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Cases and turn on notifications. Trust me, this one is going to leave you speechless. I never thought my life would take this turn. If you had told me years ago that I would be sitting here sharing this story, I would have laughed. I would have told you I was a good wife, a devoted mother, a woman who knew right from wrong. But life has a way of revealing parts of yourself you never knew existed. Parts you didn't want to know existed. My name. That doesn't matter. My face. You wouldn't recognize it if you passed me on the street. But what I felt, the emptiness, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of being unseen in my own home, that you might know all too well. I was 38, wife. A stepmother. A woman who had spent years molding herself into the image of the perfect spouse, the perfect homemaker. But somewhere along the way I lost myself. Or maybe I was never really there to begin with. My husband, let's call him David, was a provider in every sense of the word. He worked hard. He made sure there was food on the table, a roof over our heads, a comfortable life. But that's all it was. Comfort. No warmth, no intimacy, no connection. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't abusive. He just wasn't there. First, I made excuses for him. He's tired. He has a lot on his plate. He's doing all this for us. But over time, the excuses turned into questions. Does he even see me? Does he even care? I started to wonder if I was just another piece of furniture in his life. Something useful, something expected, but nothing more. And then there was Erick, my stepson, 20 years old, polite, respectful, the kind of young man any mother would be proud to have raised, except I didn't raise him. I married his father when Erick was already a teenager. By then, he was mostly grown, independent, keeping to himself. We were never particularly close. Never had that bond that some stepmothers and sons share. But there was always something about him. Something quiet. Reserved. A mystery in his eyes that made it hard to tell what he was thinking. He wasn't like other boys his age. Loud, reckless, always seeking attention. No, Erick was different. Thoughtful. Observant. And as the years passed, I started to notice the way he noticed me. It wasn't blatant. Not at first. Just small things. The way his eyes lingered a little too long when we spoke. The way he seemed to listen more intently than his father ever did. The way he was present. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining it. That I was reading too much into things because I was lonely. But the truth was, I was lonely. More lonely than I had ever been in my life. Imagine waking up every day next to someone who doesn't even look at you. Someone who used to touch you, kiss you, whisper in your ear at night. But now you're just two people existing in the same space, barely acknowledging each other. The silence in our bedroom was suffocating. The absence of his touch was like an ache that never went away. And then there was Erick, noticing me, seeing me. It started so subtly that I didn't even realize it was happening. Conversations that lasted a little longer than necessary. A passing comment about how I looked nice that made my stomach tighten in a way it shouldn't have. A moment in the kitchen when our hands brushed, and neither of us pulled away right away. I knew it was wrong. I knew I should have stepped back. Should have drawn a clear line before things even had the chance to blur. But there was something intoxicating about being seen, about being noticed, about feeling wanted. And that was where everything began that evening. Started like any other. Dinner had been quiet. David, as usual, had barely spoken. His phone had his full attention. Emails, work messages, things that couldn't wait. Things that were always more important than sitting across from his wife and his son, sharing a meal together. I had long stopped trying to compete. Erick, on the other hand, was different. He always made eye contact when he spoke, always gave me his attention in a way that felt deliberate, like I was worth listening to, worth seeing. I don't even remember what we had eaten that night. I just remember the way David stood up as soon as his plate was empty, muttered something about having work to do, and disappeared into his office, closing the door behind him. That was it. No conversation. No goodnight. Nothing. I sat there for a moment, staring at his untouched glass of wine, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the empty space he left behind. I felt the familiar sting creeping into my chest, that dull ache of being dismissed, of being invisible in my own home. And then Erick spoke. "You okay?" Just 2 words. Simple, but they hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I turned to him, forcing a smile, trying to shake the feeling off. "Yeah, I'm fine." He didn't look convinced. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know." Something in his voice made my throat tighten. It was the gentleness of it, the way he said it, like he actually cared. I wasn't used to that anymore. I exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "I'm just tired." He nodded but didn't push. That was another thing about Erick. He knew when to say something and he knew when to just be there. I stood up, collecting the plates, and he followed, helping me clear the table. I told him he didn't have to, but he insisted. "It's the least I can do," he said, flashing a small smile. And then there was that moment, that subtle shift. I reached for a dish at the same time he did, and our hands brushed. Just for a second, just skin against skin. But the reaction it sent through me was immediate, a shiver running up my spine before I could stop it. I pulled away too quickly, my breath catching in my throat. Erick didn't move at first. His eyes flickered up to mine, searching, questioning. I couldn't tell if he had felt it too, or if I was the only one who noticed the charge in the air between us. I forced a chuckle, brushing my hands on my dress. "Sorry, It's okay," he said, his voice quieter now. "Floor." I turned back to the sink, my mind racing. Why did that feel so? Well, I cut the thought off before it could go anywhere. It was nothing. But then I felt him, still standing close behind me. The room suddenly felt too small. The silence stretched. The only sound was the slow trickle of water from the faucet. And before I knew it, the words slipped out. "Do you want to taste it?" I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was an attempt to break the tension. Maybe I just wanted to distract myself from whatever I was feeling. But the second the words left my mouth, I knew it had been the wrong thing to say. Or maybe the right thing. I turned, holding up the spoon, the remnants of the dessert I had made earlier still on it. Completely innocent gesture. At least it should have been. But the way Erick looked at me in that moment. He hesitated, his lips parted slightly, his expression unreadable. He wasn't looking at the spoon. He was looking at me. And then, slowly, he leaned in. I held my breath as he took the spoon from my hand. His fingers brushing against mine just for a second, but long enough to make my pulse jump. He tasted it. his tongue flicking over his lips afterward. His gaze still locked onto me. "It's good," he murmured. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. I'm glad." Something unspoken lingered between us. Something thick, heavy, undeniable. And for the first time I realized that whatever this was, it had already begun. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the ticking clock on the wall. The house was silent. David was beside me, turned away as usual. His back to me, his breathing slow and steady, asleep. Distant even in unconsciousness. My mind kept replaying that moment in the kitchen. The way Erick had looked at me, the way I had felt, the way my body had reacted before my brain even had the chance to process it. Was it just loneliness? That's what I told myself. That's all it was. But then why couldn't I shake the feeling? I rolled onto my side, squeezing my eyes shut, willing myself to let it go. But the thoughts came anyway. Creeping in like shadows stretching across a dimly lit room. I used to feel this way with David. I remembered the early days, when he couldn't keep his hands off me, when his eyes would light up just at the sight of me walking into a room. I used to wake up to long, lingering kisses. Used to feel wanted, desired, cherished. But somewhere along the way that had faded. Work had taken priority. Then stress. Then routine. Tried. God knows I tried. I put effort into myself, into us. I planned date nights, dressed up, initiated conversations. But every attempt had been met with indifference. Politeness at best. And eventually I stopped trying. Because nothing hurts more than throwing yourself at someone who doesn't even notice you're falling. I exhaled shakily, pressing my palm to my chest, as if I could steady the erratic beat of my heart. This isn't about Erick. This is just about me. About how empty I feel. That's what I told myself. But deep down I knew there was something else too. Something more dangerous. I remembered the way Erick's eyes had held mine. Had I imagined it? That lingering look. That shift in the air between us. I shouldn't have even entertained the thought. He was my stepson. There was nothing there. There couldn't be. And yet, the moment had felt so real. So charged. Like a door had cracked open just a little. Just enough to let something forbidden slip through. I turned onto my stomach, burying my face in my pillow. This is ridiculous. Stop thinking about it. But my mind wouldn't let go. I thought about how different Erick was from his father. How he saw me. How he actually listened when I spoke. The way he noticed things, the small details, the shifts in my mood. He asked me if I was okay. When was the last time David had done that? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I hadn't done anything. But my body betrayed me. The heat in my chest, the way my breath had caught when Erick leaned in, the way my fingers still tingled from the brief brush of his skin against mine. Guilt twisted in my stomach. This was insane. He was just being polite. He was just kind. And I was reading too much into it because I was starved for attention. That's all this was. I clenched my jaw, trying to shake off the ridiculous feeling clawing at my insides. I had to let this go because if I didn't know if I trusted myself not to want more. I tried to push it out of my mind. Tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But the universe, or maybe my own foolishness, kept placing us in situations that made it impossible to ignore. The first time it happened, I told myself it was a coincidence. I had gotten up in the middle of the night, stomach grumbling, unable to sleep. The house was quiet, cloaked in the kind of stillness that only comes when the world is deep in slumber. I tiptoed into the kitchen, the cool tile against my bare feet sending a shiver up my spine. I reached for a glass in the cabinet, then turned to grab the water jug from the fridge, and nearly collided into Erick. I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. "Jesus, you scared me." He let out a quiet chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sorry. I was just getting water." I nodded, stepping aside, but the space between us was too small. As he moved past me, his arm brushed against mine. It was the smallest touch, barely anything, but my skin burned. I held my breath. The air between us felt thick, heavy, charged. He hesitated for a second, just a second, but I noticed it. The way his eyes lingered on mine. The way something unspoken passed between us. Then, just like that, he was gone, disappearing back down the hallway. I stood there, gripping the counter, my pulse roaring in my ears. Had meant nothing. Nothing. But why was my heart racing? The second time, it was during the day. I was in the living room, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, when Erick walked in and sat across from me. For a while we just sat there, existing in the same space. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. "Are you happy?" I blinked, looking up. What? He was watching me, his expression unreadable. I mean, with my dad. "Are you happy?" The question caught me so off guard that I actually laughed. A dry, humorless chuckle. That's a complicated question. He tilted his head slightly, waiting. Sighed, setting my phone down. Happiness is a funny thing, Erick. Sometimes you don't even realize you've lost it until it's too late. His gaze flickered with something, understanding. Sadness. Then, softer this time, almost a whisper, he asked. "So you're not?" I swallowed. I should have shut the conversation down. Should have told him that some things aren't meant to be discussed. But instead I held his gaze and said, "I don't know." And I wasn't lying. I didn't know. Because how do you measure happiness when you've been living in a haze of numbness for so long? He didn't say anything after that. Just nodded slowly, as if he understood something I didn't. But from that moment on, something shifted. The way he looked at me changed. It wasn't just polite or casual. It was something else, something I didn't have a name for. And the worst part, I didn't want to stop it. I don't know if I planned it. I'd like to believe it just happened. But deep down, in the part of myself I wasn't ready to confront, I think I had been walking toward this moment all along. It was a rainy evening. The kind where the sky wept endlessly. The soft drumming of raindrops against the windows made the house feel smaller, more intimate. My husband was working late again. I had made dinner, set the table for 3, only for Erick and I to end up eating alone. Had become routine. Just the two of us sitting across from each other. The empty chair between us, a quiet reminder of the absence I no longer bothered to acknowledge. After dinner I made tea. Erick lingered in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, watching me as I poured the steaming liquid into 2 mugs. "You make this every night," he observed. I smiled faintly, stirring in a spoonful of honey. "It helps me sleep." "Does it work?" "Not really." Quiet chuckle. You ever wonder what it would feel like to just leave?" I turned to him, brows furrowing. "Leave?" He shrugged. "Just walk away from everything. Start over." I studied him, the way his fingers drummed absently against the countertop. That sounds like something someone says when they're not happy where they are. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "Maybe." Another silence. Not awkward, just charged. I don't know why I said what I said next. Maybe it was the tea warming my hands. Maybe it was the rain tapping against the window like a whispered temptation. Or maybe it was the way he was looking at me, curious, intense, like he saw me in a way no one had in years. I lifted my mug, blew gently across the surface, then met his gaze. "Do you want to taste it?" The words hung between us. I wasn't just talking about the tea. Erick's expression shifted. Confusion flickered across his face before something else settled in its place. Something I recognized because I felt it too. For a split second he said nothing. Then he let out a soft, nervous laugh. "That's probably not a good idea," he said, voice lower now. I tilted my head slightly. "Why not?" His grip on the counter tightened. He looked away, exhaling slowly. "You know why." And I did. Course I did. I should have stopped there. Should have laughed it off, changed the subject, pretended it was nothing. But I didn't. Instead I took a step closer. Close enough to see the way his throat bobbed when he swallowed. Close enough to catch the faint scent of his cologne. Close enough to hear the way his breath hitched when I leaned in. And that was it. That was the moment we crossed a line we could never uncross. I wish I could say that after that moment, Everything went back to normal. That we laughed, left it off, went about our evening, and pretended nothing had shifted. But that would be a lie. 'Cause everything had changed. The air between us was no longer just air. It was charged, dense, almost tangible. It wrapped itself around us like a fog, thick with everything we didn't say, everything we refused to admit. Words hovered just beneath the surface of our silence, trembling on the edge of our tongues, but never daring to be spoken. It was the kind of silence that demanded attention, that made the seconds stretch unbearably long. And yet, neither of us had the courage to break it, to acknowledge the shift, to name what we both felt pulsing just beneath the surface. Erick didn't finish his tea. He held the mug for a moment, as if unsure of what to do next, then quietly set it down on the counter. His fingers brushed the ceramic one last time before he turned away. "I think I'm gonna go to bed," he mumbled, barely meeting my eyes. His voice was low, almost uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was asking permission or making a statement. And then he was gone. I heard the soft creak of the hallway floorboards as he walked away. Then the click of his bedroom door shutting gently, but firmly behind him. I stood there, motionless, surrounded by the lingering heat of the moment that had just unraveled. My fingers curled around my own mug. The ceramic was warm against my skin, the steam still rising in soft spirals into the air. But inside I felt cold. "Hello." I stared at the space he'd left behind, at the second cup of tea still sitting on the counter, untouched, cooling with every breath of silence. My thoughts raced, but my body wouldn't move. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just an awkward moment, a lapse in judgment, a flicker of something that would pass by morning, just a stupid, meaningless moment. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying. Because deep down, in the part of me I tried to quiet, I knew better. The next morning everything felt different. Or maybe it wasn't the house that had changed. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the way I moved through the rooms, slower, more cautious, like the walls themselves had witnessed something they couldn't unsee. I woke up to an empty bed again. My husband was already gone, having slipped out before the sun rose like he always did. No kiss goodbye. No note. Not even the familiar sound of the front door closing had stirred me. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was used to it by now. But the hollow ache in my chest told another story. I made my way into the kitchen and stopped when I saw it, the same cup of tea from the night before. Still sitting exactly where Erick had left it, now cold and half full. A small, physical reminder of the thing we weren't talking about. A ghost of the night before. I stood there just staring at it, not sure whether to throw it away or let it sit a little longer. Like if I left it untouched, maybe none of it had really happened. Then I heard it. The soft sound of a door opening down the hall. Erick stepped into view, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His hair slightly tousled, wearing a loose t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants that hung low on his hips. Normally, he'd mumble a sleepy morning, maybe flash a faint smile before heading straight to the fridge. But today he didn't move right away. He paused in the doorway. His eyes met mine just for a second. And in that second everything was different. He looked uncertain. Not nervous, not guilty, but hesitant. Guarded. Like he was waiting to see how I would react before he decided what to do next. His posture was stiff, shoulders slightly tense, the easy familiarity that usually existed between us suddenly missing. He was avoiding my gaze now, shifting his weight, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Like the very air in the room had become too heavy to breathe. I opened my mouth, ready to say something. Anything. Something casual, something light-hearted to pull us both back from the edge, to pretend we were still on safe ground. But he spoke first. "I have to go out today," he said quietly, moving toward the fridge and grabbing a bottle of water. He didn't look at me as he twisted the cap open. I blinked, caught off guard by how ordinary the words sounded when everything between us felt anything but ordinary. "Oh, okay," I said, my voice soft. Then after a beat, "Where?" "Just out." 2 words. So simple on the surface, But it was the way he said them that made something twist in my chest. His voice was clipped, his eyes still not meeting mine. There was a subtle edge of caution in his tone, like each word had been carefully chosen, rehearsed even, as if too much truth might slip through if he wasn't careful. It wasn't what he said, it was how guarded he sounded. Like he was trying to close a door that I hadn't even knocked on yet. And I should have left it at that. I should have nodded and turned away. Let him keep that distance, the space he was clearly trying to put between us. He needed it, maybe we both did, and I should have respected that. But I didn't. Instead, something rose up in me. Something raw and aching, something that didn't want to be pushed aside so easily. "Are you avoiding me?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, almost tentative. But the question landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through the silence between us. He froze, just for a moment. Then I saw it. His hand tightening around the water bottle, the plastic crinkling under the pressure. His knuckles turned white. He still wouldn't look at me. "No," he said. Too quickly. Too flat. Light. And we both knew it. He was avoiding me. And the worst part, I didn't blame him. Because the truth was, I was avoiding myself too. Neither of us wanted to face what had happened. What almost happened. What could happen if we weren't careful. So instead we pretended. We danced around each other like strangers stuck in a play we didn't audition for but suddenly couldn't leave. But pretending didn't make the tension go away. If anything, it made it worse, made it stretch tighter like an elastic band pulled too far. In the days that followed, the silence between us grew thicker, heavier, more deliberate. Erick barely spoke to me. He didn't linger in the kitchen anymore, didn't ask about my day or share details about his. He spent most of his time in his room, only emerging when necessary. And even then, it was like he was timing his movements to avoid crossing my path. And when he did cross it, it felt like he couldn't get away fast enough. He moved quickly, like being in the same room as me for too long might expose something he didn't want to face. Something we didn't want to name. I tried to act normal. God, I tried. I greeted him with a smile when he passed by. I asked him how he was doing, how his classes were going, if he needed anything from the store. My voice stayed light, my tone even, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I pretended not to notice the way his shoulders tensed whenever our hands accidentally brushed. I ignored how his eyes would dart away the second mine found his, like eye contact had suddenly become too intimate. And every night, when the house went quiet and the lights were off, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The guilt, it didn't creep, clawed. It tore through my chest, restless and relentless, demanding answers I didn't have. What was I doing? Why did I feel like this? I told myself it wasn't my fault. That I didn't ask for this. That I wasn't the one who had crossed any visible lines. I was lonely. I was neglected. I had spent years in a marriage where I felt like a ghost in my own home. Seen but not seen, heard but not listened to, touched but never truly felt. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't trying to create this. Whatever this was. But if that were true, why did his absence feel like a loss? Why did it hurt when he avoided me? Why did I miss the way he used to look at me, like I mattered, like I was more than just someone who blended into the furniture? My husband never noticed anything. He never really saw me. Why would he? His life revolved around deadlines, business calls, and obligations I wasn't a part of. He came home late, left early. Our conversations, when they happened at all, were reduced to practicalities. Bills, groceries, calendar reminders. When he kissed me, it was out of habit. A quick press of lips against my cheek, like crossing off a task on his to-do list. When he touched me, it was routine, mechanical, like a script he barely remembered reading. There was no heat, no curiosity, no desire. I used to mourn it, used to cry in the shower when I thought he didn't hear me. But somewhere along the way I stopped crying. Because even pain needs acknowledgement to survive. Now there was just numbness. But with Erick, that numbness had cracked. And what leaked through terrified me. I had spent years mourning a marriage that, on paper, still existed. A marriage that wore the mask of normalcy. 2 rings, 1 house, shared responsibilities. Yet beneath the surface it had been hollow for so long. Alive in name, yes, but lifeless in every other way. I used to grieve that quiet death. I remember the ache of sleeping beside a man who no longer reached for me, of eating dinner across from someone who no longer asked about my day. I'd sit in the bathtub until the water turned cold, tears blending with the steam, mourning something that was technically still there, but gone just the same. But now something else was happening. Something I hadn't been prepared for. Because this time, it wasn't just my husband who had stopped seeing me. Now I was losing Erick too. And that hurt in a way I wasn't ready to admit. Not even to myself. It wasn't supposed to matter this much. He wasn't mine. He wasn't supposed to be the one I noticed or longed for or thought about when the house went still at night. But somehow, in the quiet erosion of my marriage, Erick had become the only person who made me feel real again. Who made me feel seen. And now I felt him slipping away. I lay awake at night, staring up at the ceiling, the darkness pressing down on me like a weight. My mind became a loop I couldn't shut off, the moment playing over and over like a scene caught on repeat. The way his eyes had widened, the hesitation in his breath, the way he had almost leaned in, before stopping, before retreating, before everything shifted into something we couldn't name. That tension had never left. It hung between us like a heavy curtain, thick and suffocating, woven from everything we hadn't said. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that I was imagining it, that we could go back, that all we needed was space and time and silence to make it disappear. But the truth echoed louder in the quiet. I was lying to myself. Something had changed. And no matter how much I tried to deny it, no matter how many times I told myself it was just loneliness, just confusion, just nothing, I knew better. Because once a line has been blurred, it never looks the same again. I turned onto my side, wrapping my arms around my pillow like it might keep the pieces of me from falling apart. My eyes stayed wide open, adjusting to the darkness around me, the familiar outlines of furniture reduced to vague shadows. The only sound in the room was the slow, steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Each second passed like a drop of water in a leaking pipe. Steady, sharp, unrelenting. But inside my head it was chaos. A storm of questions and what-ifs and memories I couldn't unsee. How did I even get here? How had I, a grown woman, a wife, a mother figure to him, allowed things to slip so far? I was supposed to know better. I was supposed to be the anchor, the constant, the one who didn't let emotions muddy the boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. And yet I couldn't ignore it. Couldn't forget the way my heart had raced in that moment. Couldn't pretend that something deep within me, something buried for years, hadn't stirred to life. It wasn't about passion or lust. It was about being seen. It was about the way he looked at me like I mattered. Like I was more than just someone to walk past in the hallway. Like I was still a woman. And that awakening, as quiet and brief as it was, had changed everything. Not because anything happened, but because suddenly it could. And that possibility, that realization, was both electrifying and terrifying all at once. Something I had long thought was buried. Some quiet, shadowy part of myself that I believed I had silenced, had started to stir again. I kept wondering, was it just loneliness? Was it simply the ache of being unseen for too long? The emptiness of a marriage that had faded into routine and distance, that made me crave attention like a starving woman craves bread? Had all those years of feeling invisible worn me down until even a glance felt like salvation? Or was it something darker? That question terrified me, because part of me didn't want to hear the answer. I hated myself for even entertaining the thought. I hated the way my mind drifted, not to the moment but to the feeling of it. I hated that, despite all the confusion and guilt, a part of me still missed the way Erick used to look at me. Before everything changed. Before that night. Before the tension wedged itself between us like a wall of glass. Transparent, yet impenetrable. Before he stopped looking at me like I was someone he recognized and started looking at me like I was a stranger wearing a familiar face. The days after blurred together in a colorless haze. I went through the motions like a machine on autopilot, folding laundry, sweeping floors, stirring pots of food I didn't want to eat. I smiled when I needed to, laughed at the right moments. I wore the role of a devoted wife like an old coat, tattered but still functional. But inside I was unraveling thread by fragile thread. At dinner, I'd sit across from my husband, watching him hunched over his phone, scrolling through emails, answering texts, chuckling softly at things I would never be a part of. His attention was never on me, not really. He barely looked up, and when he did, it was like he was remembering I existed for a second and then forgetting again. Once that used to hurt. I used to feel the sting of that dismissal like a paper cut to the heart. Now I didn't even flinch. Numbness had settled into the spaces where love used to live. And then, there was Erick. Erick, who once saw me, truly saw me, in ways his father never had. But now even he avoided my gaze. If our eyes did meet, it was fleeting, shallow. As if we were both afraid of what might happen if we lingered too long in that space between acknowledgement and exposure. I had lost him. Not in the way I used to fear. Not like my husband, who faded from me slowly over the years until his presence became nothing more than a habit. No, this was something else entirely. I had lost Erick in a way that was far more painful. Because this time it wasn't time or distance or circumstance. It was me. Because now, when he looked at me, he didn't see the woman who cooked him meals or asked about his classes or remembered how he liked his coffee. He saw someone else entirely. Someone I never intended to become. One night, when the house was silent and everyone else was asleep, the walls dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, I finally let myself break. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, knees pulled tightly to my chest, my back pressed against the cold wall. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the tears sliding silently down my cheeks, one after another without pause. What was I doing? Who was I turning into? I had spent so many years believing I was strong, the woman who stayed when things got hard, who kept the house warm and steady, who held everything together when it all threatened to fall apart. I was the glue, the anchor, the protector of peace. But now I didn't even recognize the person I saw in the mirror. I'd crossed a line. Not in the way others might define it. Maybe nothing had happened. Not in the way that leaves evidence. No bruises, no whispers, no visible scars. But I knew the truth. Because betrayal doesn't always start in the body. It starts somewhere much deeper. In the mind, in the quiet corners of the heart where longing grows in silence. And I had already gone too far. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater, took in a shaky breath, and slowly pulled myself off the floor. I walked to the mirror, my feet cold against the wood, and looked into my own eyes. What I saw made my stomach tighten. They were hollow, distant, like someone else was living behind them. And in that still moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Some lines, once crossed, can never be undone. Have you ever stood at the edge of something irreversible? Have you ever found yourself staring into a moment, knowing that one more step could change everything? That one small choice, one word, one touch, could shatter everything you thought you knew about yourself. That's where I was. That's where he was. And whether we wanted to admit it or not, there was no going back. That's where I was, teetering on the edge of something I never thought I'd find myself near. That's where Erick was too. We had both arrived at that quiet, dangerous intersection, where emotion and instinct collide, where silence says more than words ever could. And whether either of us had planned it or not, we had crossed into a space that felt different now. Heavier, fragile. And now, there was no going back. That moment, the hesitation in his eyes, the breath that caught in his throat, the lingering tension we didn't dare name. It replays in my head like a song on loop. I see it constantly. I feel it even when I try not to. And I wonder, what was going through his mind in that exact second? Was it shock? Disbelief? Was he scared of what we were both silently acknowledging? Or maybe scared of himself? The part of him that didn't pull away fast enough, that looked a second too long, that let the silence stretch between us just a beat too far? Or was it something else? Was there, buried deep beneath the surface, just like there was in me, a part of him that felt the pull, that draw toward something dangerous, something forbidden, something that promised to make us feel alive again, even if just for a moment? I can't stop thinking about it. No matter how hard I try. No matter how many times I replay it and try to rewrite the ending in my head. And I need to know, what do you think? If you were in his shoes, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Pretended nothing happened? Shoved it deep down inside and carried on like nothing had shifted? Or would you have leaned in? Would you have listened to that voice, the one that whispers late at night when no one else is around, telling you that something more is waiting on the other side of that line? Tell me. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you would have done. And if you've been through something like this, or if you're in it right now, you're not alone. Let's talk about it. And if this story has shaken you even a little, if it's made you feel something you didn't expect to feel, then don't forget to subscribe. Because believe me when I say this is only the beginning. Loneliness, it's a strange, slippery thing. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It doesn't announce itself with thunder and lightning. No. It slips in quietly, silently. It settles in like fog, wrapping itself around your life so slowly that you don't even notice it until one day you wake up and realize you're completely lost in it. Changes you. It alters the way you see the world. It makes you crave things you swore you'd never crave. Attention, affection, touch, validation, escape. It distorts your boundaries. It blurs the lines between right and wrong, between want and need, between momentary comfort and lasting consequence. And if you're not careful, it will take you places you never thought you'd go. That's what happened to me. I never meant to cross any lines. I never sat down one day and made a plan to betray anyone. I never looked in the mirror and thought, today is the day I let everything unravel. Just happened. That's the thing about life. Doesn't give you warnings. It doesn't flash a red light when you're standing on the edge of a choice that will change everything. It doesn't scream, stop, when you're about to take that step, the one you can't come back from. Just lets you keep walking, and walking, and walking, until the ground beneath you has shifted, until the person in the mirror looks unfamiliar, until the damage is already done. And by then, by the time you realize how far you've gone, it's already too late. So if you're watching this right now, listening to my voice, wondering how someone could end up where I did, I have one thing to say to you. Be careful. Be careful where your emotions take you. Be careful what you allow yourself to believe in moments of vulnerability, of hunger, of weakness. Be careful what you convince yourself is just a moment, because some moments, they echo for a lifetime. Some mistakes don't just fade. Some regrets don't let you forget. Some lines, once crossed, mark you forever. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making it this far. If you connected with this, if it made you think or feel or question, like, comment, and subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Cases. Because this story isn't over. And what's coming next, you won't want to miss. See you in the next one.